The stroller hit the iron gate with a sound I will never forget. This sharp, hollow clang of metal against metal that cut right through the sound of the rain. I watched the wheels spin uselessly in the air for a second before the whole thing crashed sideways onto the wet gravel driveway, and my daughter's little stuffed rabbit fell out and landed in a puddle. That moment is burned into me. Not just the sound, not just the sight of it. What's burned into me is what my husband said next, standing right beside the woman who threw it. He looked at me, his wife of 8 years, the mother of his child, and said, "She's a disgrace to my family." He meant me. He was talking about me. I need to back up because if I start from that moment, you won't understand how we got there. You won't understand why it hit me so much harder than just the stroller, just the rain, just the words. You need to understand what I thought our life was. You need to understand what I had built and what I had believed and how completely I had refused to see what was happening right in front of me. My name is Natalie. I'm 34 years old. I'm an architect. I grew up in Caldwell, a mid-sized city in the Rust Belt that used to run on steel mills and auto parts plants, and now runs mostly on nostalgia and cheap real estate. I know every brick of this city. I studied it, I drew it, I loved it, even when other people were leaving. When I was 22 and got into grad school in Philadelphia, my mother cried and told me I was finally escaping. I came back anyway. I came back because someone has to care about the places that other people give up on, and I decided that someone was going to be me. I met Derek when I was 26. He was 31, working in commercial real estate development, which in Caldwell mostly meant trying to convince investors that the old warehouse district had authentic character and untapped potential. We met at a city council rezoning meeting, of all places. I was there representing a preservation coalition. He was there representing a developer who wanted to tear down a 1920s brick foundry to build a parking structure. We argued for about 45 minutes in front of 12 bored council members, and afterward, he asked me to get coffee so we could, in his words, continue the discussion. I told him the discussion was over and the foundry was staying. He laughed. I said yes to coffee. We dated for 2 years, got engaged in early spring. I remember because the forsythia bushes along the Millbrook River Walk were just starting to bloom, this violent yellow against all the gray, and Derek got down on one knee right there on the path with mud on his shoes and a ring he'd picked out himself. No jeweler consultation, no input from his mother, just him and a small vintage diamond in an Art Deco setting that looked like something off a 1930s drafting table. He knew me. That's what I thought then. He knew exactly who I was. We got married in June, 8 years ago now. Small ceremony. My mother, my 2 best friends, Derek's brother Colton, a handful of colleagues. Derek's mother, Vivian, couldn't make it. Some kind of conflict. A trip she'd already booked, something vague that I was too happy to press on. His stepfather, Ray, showed up for the reception and spent most of it standing in the corner with a glass of bourbon, watching everything with this flat, evaluating expression that I mistook for shyness. I would spend the next 8 years making that same mistake about Ray, mistaking calculation for quietness. Our life settled into something I genuinely loved. We bought a row house in the Millbrook district, 3 blocks from that foundry I'd fought to save. I built my practice slowly, residential renovations first, then a commission to restore a 1910 post office that got me written up in a regional design journal, then bigger projects. By 32, I had 4 employees and a reputation in the city that I'd worked my whole adult life to build. Derek's development work picked up too. We weren't rich by any national standard, but in Caldwell, with a paid-down mortgage and 2 reasonable salaries, we were comfortable in a way that felt earned. Our daughter Wren was born 18 months ago, February, the coldest week of the year naturally. She arrived 3 weeks early and screamed through her entire first night like she was furious at the inconvenience of the world, and I lay there in that hospital bed, completely undone by love, in a way I hadn't been prepared for. Derek cried when he held her. Real tears, no performance. I remember thinking, okay, this is real. This is a person who is capable of this, and we made this person together. And whatever comes next, this is a foundation. Wren has a hamster. I know she's only 18 months old, and technically the hamster is mine to manage, but she chose him. We were at a pet store getting fish food for Derek's office tank, don't ask, and Wren pointed at a cage of dwarf hamsters with the absolute certainty of a person who has made a decision. She made this low, insistent sound she makes when she's completely sure about something. The hamster is named Pip, which I chose because it was short, and Wren could almost say it. It comes out something like, "ih," but she lights up when she hears his wheel spinning at night. Pip lives in a glass tank in her room and runs approximately 11 miles a night, according to the little activity tracker we attach to his wheel as a joke. He is a small, ridiculous creature, and I am embarrassingly attached to him. That's the life I had. Row house in Caldwell, architecture practice, a daughter who says "ih" for her hamster's name, a husband who knew what ring to buy without asking. I should tell you about Ray now, because Ray is the rot in the foundation. Ray, Derek's stepfather, who married Vivian when Derek was 15. Ray, who has never once in 8 years looked at me like I belonged in the family. Ray, who I told myself was just old school and reserved and not a hugger. Ray, who runs a property management company that handles about 60% of the rental units in the eastern part of Caldwell, which means he has money and connections and the particular confidence of a man who owns the buildings where other people have no choice but to live. Ray never liked me. I understood that early. What I misread was whether it mattered. Derek told me his stepfather was like that with everyone, distant, a little cold, not openly warm. He grew up hard, Derek said once, with the tired loyalty of someone who has explained a difficult person too many times. He's not mean, he just doesn't know how to be soft. I accepted that. I'm an architect. I work with difficult clients, with contractors who cut corners, with city officials who have opinions about setbacks and sightlines. I can work around a man who doesn't warm up easily. What I couldn't see, what I refused to see, honestly, was that Ray wasn't cold with everyone. He was cold specifically with me. At Thanksgiving, Ray would hold court at the head of the table, telling stories, laughing, pulling Colton into the conversation, engaging with Vivian's friends. Then he'd turn to me, and the warmth would shut off like a draft from an open window. Not rude exactly, never directly rude, just absent, like I wasn't fully there, like my presence in the room was technically acknowledged, but not actually registered. The first time I felt something shift was last November. Vivian's birthday dinner, held at Ray's villa, which sounds ridiculous to say about a property in Caldwell, but that's actually what it is. An old estate on the north ridge of the city that Ray had renovated in the 90s, with iron gates at the end of the driveway and a fountain that doesn't work anymore, and about 14 rooms that are mostly unused. Ray bought it when the previous owner went bankrupt and has been renovating it in stages ever since. It looks like money, and also like someone's idea of what money should look like, which is slightly different. Wren was about 16 months at that point. I brought the stroller because the gravel driveway is uneven, and I didn't want to carry her the whole way. Derek was running late, a call with a contractor that went long, so I arrived with Wren and her diaper bag and Pip's travel carrier, because Wren had refused to leave the house without him, which is a battle I had decided was not worth fighting that day. Vivian met us at the door and was lovely, as she always is with Wren, crouching down to her level and making faces until Wren laughed. Ray stood in the hallway behind her and watched us come in with that flat expression. And then he looked at the hamster carrier and said very quietly, "We don't bring animals to dinner." I said, just as quietly, "She wouldn't come without him. He'll stay in the carrier the whole time." Ray looked at me for a moment. Then he turned and walked back into the house. That was November. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself he was just particular about his house. I told myself a lot of things in the months leading up to early spring, which is when everything finally broke open in a way I couldn't explain away anymore. March arrived the way it always does in Caldwell, without much ceremony and with a lot of cold rain. The kind of rain that isn't dramatic, just relentless. The kind that soaks into everything and turns the old brick facades dark and makes the city look like a photograph of itself taken in bad light. Derek had been distracted for weeks. I noticed it, but I filed it under work stress. He'd been talking about a big development deal on the south side, an old textile mill that a Pittsburgh investment group wanted to convert into mixed-use residential. A lot of money, a lot of moving parts, a lot of conversations that he took in the other room with the door half closed. I didn't push. I was busy too. I had a deadline for a historic renovation proposal, and Wren had just gotten over an ear infection, and Pip had somehow managed to escape his tank twice in 1 week, and we'd found him both times behind the radiator, unhurt and apparently unbothered. Life was full and a little frayed at the edges, the way life with a toddler always is, but it wasn't alarming. It was just life. Then Derek told me about the party. Vivian and Ray were hosting a family gathering at the villa to celebrate, and I'm using that word carefully, because what they were celebrating was the closing of the textile mill deal. Ray had been a silent investor. Derek had been the development contact. It had come together, apparently, and Ray wanted to mark the occasion with what he called a family celebration. Derek mentioned it on a Tuesday evening while I was putting Wren to bed, which meant I only got half the information, and when I came out and asked for the rest, he was already on his phone again. "It's just a dinner," he said. "Saturday. Ray's place." "Who's coming?" "Family, some of Ray's business people. Just a dinner." I should have asked more questions. I should have noticed that Derek said Ray's place instead of Mom's house, which is what he usually called it. I should have noticed that he didn't quite meet my eyes when he said just a dinner. I should have noticed a lot of things that I was too tired and too trusting and too willing to believe in our 8 years of foundation to actually notice. Saturday came. It rained all morning, that same relentless Caldwell gray rain. I put Wren in the stroller and loaded the diaper bag and told myself it was just a dinner and drove to the North Ridge with the wipers going the whole way, not knowing that I was driving toward the worst moment of my life and that my husband was going to be standing on the other side of it. The iron gates were open when I pulled up. I could see cars in the driveway already, Ray's black SUV, Colton's truck, 2 cars I didn't recognize. Through the tall windows of the front room, I could see movement, figures, warm light. It looked, from the outside, exactly like what Derek had said it was, a family dinner. A celebration, something ordinary and unremarkable and fine. I unbuckled Wren from her car seat. I set up the stroller on the wet gravel. I put her in it and tucked the rain cover partway down and started up toward the front door. And that's when I saw her for the first time, standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the light, with Ray's hand on her shoulder and an expression on her face that I couldn't read from a distance, but that I would understand completely 30 minutes later, when she picked up my daughter's stroller and threw it through the gate into the rain. I just didn't know that yet. I was still walking up the driveway. I was still a woman who believed in her foundation. Her name was Simone. I found that out later. In that first moment, standing at the base of the driveway with rain starting to collect in the hood of Wren's stroller cover, I just saw a woman. Tall, maybe 35, wearing a dark blazer that had no business being worn in this weather, with her hair pulled back so severely it looked like a statement. She was standing in the doorway of Ray's villa like she belonged there, not like a guest, like someone who had measured the doorframe and decided it was hers. Ray had his hand on her shoulder. That detail lodged in me somewhere before I understood why. In 8 years, I had never once seen Ray put his hand on my shoulder. Not at my wedding to his stepson, not when Wren was born, not at any of the Thanksgiving dinners where I had sat at that table and tried, genuinely tried, to be a person he could warm up to. His hand sat on Simone's shoulder the way hands sit on things that belong to you, easy and proprietary, and something in my chest went very quiet in a way that had nothing to do with the cold. I kept walking up the driveway. What else was I going to do? Turn around? I didn't have a reason yet. I just had a feeling, and feelings aren't reasons, and I had built 8 years of a life on the understanding that I didn't act on feelings without evidence. Derek met me at the door. He kissed my cheek, not my mouth, my cheek, which I filed away without filing it away, the way you do when your brain knows something your heart isn't ready to confirm. He took the diaper bag off my shoulder and said, "You made it," which was an odd thing to say about a dinner I'd been told I was expected at. "Of course I made it," I said. "You said it was a family dinner." "It is," he said. "Come in, come in." I pushed the stroller over the threshold, and that's when Simone turned from her conversation with Ray and looked at me. Not at Derek, not at Ren, at me, with an expression that I can only describe as settled, like she had been waiting for me to arrive so that something could officially begin. "Natalie," Ray said, and his voice had that particular flatness that I had spent 8 years translating as neutrality. "Glad you came." I said something polite. I'm sure I said something polite. I was on autopilot, the way you go on autopilot when your nervous system is sending signals that your conscious mind is refusing to process. I unbuckled Ren and lifted her onto my hip, and she immediately grabbed a fistful of my hair, which grounded me, because Ren's grip is absolute and real, and not subject to interpretation. Simone stepped forward. "She's beautiful," she said, looking at Ren. Her voice was smooth, a little flat, the voice of someone who says the correct things because they've learned which things are correct. "Thank you," I said. "I'm sorry, I don't think we've met." There was a pause. Not long, maybe 2 seconds, but in that 2 seconds, something passed between Simone and Ray that I caught in my peripheral vision. A glance, quick and communicative, the glance of people who have already discussed this exact moment and decided how it would go. "Simone is a business associate," Ray said. "She was involved in the textile mill project." Derek, standing just behind me, said nothing. I turned to look at him, and he was looking at the floor. That was the moment I think I actually knew. Not suspected, not feared, knew. But knowing and acting on knowing are not the same thing, and I still had a child on my hip and a stroller in the hallway, and a room full of people who were all, I was starting to realize, several steps ahead of me in a conversation I hadn't known we were having. The dinner was excruciating in the specific way that things are excruciating when everyone in the room knows a truth that is being carefully managed around you. Vivian was quieter than usual. Colton, Derek's brother, arrived late and spent most of the meal looking at his phone with the focused attention of someone who would very much like to be somewhere else. Ray talked about the textile mill deal, about the investment returns, about the plans for the development. Simone sat at the table, at Ray's table, in what I had always thought of as a family seat, and participated in the conversation like someone who had been participating in it for a long time. I fed Ren her pureed sweet potatoes. I drank 1 glass of wine. I listened. I watched Derek not look at Simone, and I watched Simone not look at Derek, and I understood, with a clarity that felt almost physical, like a hand pressing flat against my sternum, that they had practiced not looking at each other. You only practice a thing when the natural behavior would give you away. After dinner, Vivian took Ren to the front sitting room to play. I told her I'd be right there. I went to find Derek. He was in Ray's study, standing by the window, and he knew before I even closed the door why I had come. I could tell because he turned around with his face already arranged into something that was trying to be innocent and landing somewhere near apologetic instead. "How long?" I said. I didn't ask it. I said it. Because I already knew it was a statement with a number attached, not a question about whether. He didn't pretend. I'll give him that. He didn't insult me with a denial. He sat down on the edge of Ray's desk and said, 7 months. 7 months. Ren had been 11 months old when it started. I was still nursing. I was still getting up twice a night. I was still in that fog of early motherhood where your entire body belongs to another person, and you are simultaneously more exhausted and more full of love than you have ever been in your life. And my husband had looked at that and decided to go find something else. "Simone," I said. "Yes." "Ray knows." Derek looked up at me. "Natalie." "Ray knows," I said again. "That's why she's here. That's why she was in the doorway like she owned the place. Because Ray approves. Ray invited her." The silence that followed confirmed it more thoroughly than any answer could have. "He thinks," I said slowly, working it out as I spoke, "that she's a better fit. For the family. For the business, for whatever he's building here. I looked at Derek. And you went along with it. It's not like that. Then tell me what it's like, Derek, because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like your stepfather decided he didn't want me in this family, and instead of telling him to go to hell, you found someone he'd like better. Derek stood up. That's not fair. None of this is fair, I said. That's not actually a defense. I went back to the sitting room. I picked up Ren from Vivian's lap. Vivian reached out and touched my arm, and I looked at her face, and she looked wrecked, genuinely wrecked, in a way that told me she hadn't been part of the planning, that she had been managed the same way I had, kept on the outside of something, while the men in her life rearranged the furniture around her. Vivian, I said quietly, did you know she was going to be here tonight? Vivian's eyes filled. I found out this morning, she whispered. Ray said she was involved in the deal. I didn't know the rest until… She stopped. I'm so sorry, Natalie. I nodded. I put Ren back in the stroller. I gathered the diaper bag. I was moving on instinct, the clean, mechanical instinct of a person whose emotions have gone somewhere quiet and cold, to wait while the body handles the logistics. I was going to leave. I was going to take my daughter and walk out of this house, and then I was going to fall apart somewhere private. And then I was going to figure out what came next. That's when Simone came into the hallway. She had her blazer buttoned now, like she was also preparing to leave, or like she had decided the evening had concluded and was marking the moment. She looked at me loading Ren into the stroller, and something crossed her face. Not guilt, not embarrassment, something that looked almost like impatience, like I was an administrative task that hadn't been completed yet. Natalie, she said, I know this is a difficult moment, but I think it would be better for everyone if we were honest about where things stand. I looked at her. I'm listening. Derek and I are going to be together. Ray supports that. The business arrangements are already being restructured accordingly. She said it the way you'd explain a contract renegotiation. Calm, informational. I understand you have a daughter. Obviously, the appropriate arrangements will be made. I want to be clear about what happened next, because I want to be accurate. I did not yell. I did not cry. I did not say anything at all for a moment, because I was processing the fact that this woman had just described my 18-month-old daughter as a logistical consideration in a business restructuring. Then I said, very quietly, her name is Ren. Simone blinked. I know her name. Then use it, I said. She's not an arrangement. She's not a consideration. She's a person with a name and a hamster, and opinions about which socks she'll wear. And she is the most important thing in any room she is ever in. And if you're going to be in her life in any capacity, you will speak about her like she is a human being and not a line item. The silence in that hallway was absolute. Then Ray appeared from the dining room doorway, and Derek appeared at the top of the stairs. And I understood that this had been staged, all of it, the dinner, the revelation, Simone's speech. This was the moment they had planned, the handoff, the managed transition. Natalie arrives, realizes, gets told how things are going to be and presumably absorbs it and leaves quietly. Because what other option does she have? Natalie, Ray said, in that voice he'd been using with me for 8 years, the voice that treated me like a minor inconvenience, in a room I had no real claim to. I think it's time you understood that what Derek needs, what this family needs, is not what you've been providing. Simone is… Ray, I said, I'm going to stop you there. He stopped, mostly because no one stops Ray, and the unexpectedness of it created a pause he didn't have a prepared response for. I reached into the diaper bag. I had been carrying a document in there for 6 days, ever since I had gone to see my attorney, Diane Chu, after a night 3 weeks earlier when I'd found a hotel charge on the joint credit card that Derek had no explanation for, that I believed. Diane had prepared it quickly. I had been waiting, some part of me, for the right moment, and I understood now that this was it. Not because it was a good moment, but because the alternative was standing in this hallway while Ray finished his sentence, and I was not going to let Ray finish that sentence. I held out the envelope to Derek. These are divorce papers, I said. Diane Chu prepared them. You've been served. Derek's face did something complicated. Natalie, we should talk. We can talk through our attorneys. I turned back to the stroller. I'm taking Ren home now. That's when it happened. That's when Simone, who had been standing off to the side with that administrative calm, did the thing that I will never, as long as I live, be able to fully explain in terms of rational human behavior. Maybe she panicked. Maybe the divorce papers made something real that had been theoretical. See, she had been holding the shape of composed and reasonable for too long, and it cracked. Whatever the reason, she stepped forward, grabbed the handles of the stroller. Ren was not in it. I had taken Ren onto my hip. And in one motion that seemed almost too fast for the size of the gesture, she pushed it toward the front door, which was open. And the stroller went through and hit the iron gate at the end of the front step. With that sound, that hollow metal clang, and flipped sideways onto the wet gravel. And Ren's little stuffed rabbit, which had been tucked in the seat pocket, fell out and landed in a puddle. I turned to Derek. He looked at the stroller. He looked at Simone. And then, and this is the part that I will carry with me forever, the part that closed every remaining door, he looked at me and said, "She's a disgrace to my family." He meant me. Standing there with my daughter on my hip, in the rain, having just been told my marriage was over in a hallway staged for maximum efficiency, having just watched another woman throw my child's stroller into the rain, my husband looked at me and called me a disgrace. Ren made a small sound against my shoulder, something between a question and a complaint, and I looked at her face, her round, serious, 18-month-old face, with rain just starting to freckle her cheeks, and something in me went from cold to absolutely clear. I walked down the gravel drive. I picked up the rabbit from the puddle. I put it in my coat pocket. I buckled Ren into her car seat with hands that did not shake, which surprised me. I drove home. I called Diane from the car. "It's done," I said. "He's been served. There was a witness. Actually, there were several." Diane, who had been my attorney for 11 minutes at that point, but would become one of the most important people in my life over the next 9 months, said, "Good. Don't go back to that house. Don't take any calls from him tonight. Get some sleep if you can." I did not get sleep, but I got something else. I got the absolute, bone-deep certainty that I had done the right thing, which is not a comfortable feeling, but is a sustaining one. What followed was 9 months of the most demanding and clarifying work I have ever done in my life, and I'm an architect who once managed a historic restoration project that required me to source original 1910 window hardware from 4 different states, so that's saying something. The divorce was contested. Derek, guided by Ray's attorney, yes, Ray's attorney, because Ray had apparently decided that his investment in this situation warranted direct legal involvement, tried to argue that my architecture practice constituted a marital asset that should be partially credited against the settlement. Diane laughed when she read that filing, not unkindly, just with the specific laugh of a person who has seen this move before and knows exactly how it ends. It ended with Derek receiving what he was legally entitled to, and not $1 more. The row house, which I had brought the down payment for from a design commission I'd secured before we were married, stayed mine. My practice, which I had built client by client, project by project, stayed mine. Derek got his share of our joint savings account, which came to $41,000, and his car, and the contents of his home office. He also got, presumably, Simone. I try not to think about that. What I found out during the discovery process, because divorce discovery is remarkable for what it surfaces, was that Ray had been pushing Derek towards Simone for almost a year before anything happened between them. Simone was the daughter of one of Ray's earliest business partners. She had a background in commercial real estate finance. She was, in Ray's estimation, a strategically better match for what Derek was building professionally than an architect who cared about preserving old buildings. Ray had introduced them, arranged meetings, created proximity, and then waited. I don't know if that makes it better or worse. I've decided it doesn't matter. Derek made choices. Whatever Ray engineered, Derek walked through the doors that were opened for him. And that's on Derek. Colton called me 2 weeks after the dinner. He'd gotten my number from Vivian. "I want you to know," he said, "that I think what happened was wrong. All of it. and I'm sorry I didn't say anything that night." He paused. "I should have said something that night." "You were in a hard position," I said. "Not as hard as yours," he said. Colton testified in the divorce proceedings as a witness to the events of that evening, including Simone throwing the stroller and Derek's statement. It went into the record. Diane used it. It mattered. Vivian came to see me 3 months into the process, alone, without Ray knowing. She sat in my kitchen and drank tea and said, with the exhausted honesty of a woman who has been making peace with difficult men her whole life, "I chose Ray over a lot of things I shouldn't have chosen him over. I don't want to do that anymore." She has been coming to see Ren every other Sunday since then. She brings those puffy rice crackers that Ren is currently obsessed with, and she sits on the floor and lets Ren show her Pip's wheel, and she never once mentions Ray or Derek when she's here. Pip, for his part, has continued to run approximately 11 miles a night and has escaped his tank exactly once since the divorce, which I consider remarkable self-regulation given the circumstances. Ren is 2.5 now. She says Pip clearly. She also says mine, no, more, and recently, I do it, which she says about everything from putting on her shoes to carrying her own plate to the sink. She has strong opinions and a very loud laugh, and she looks like Derek in the shape of her eyes, which I have made my peace with, because she doesn't look like Derek in any of the ways that matter. I finished the Southside Textile Mill project last spring, not for Derek's firm, which had sold its stake during the divorce proceedings, but for the new development group that came in, which hired me directly to do the architectural review. The building is beautiful. It's going to be beautiful when it's done. It has the bones of something real, and I know how to work with bones like that. My practice has 4 employees and a 5th starting in the fall. I am tired sometimes in the way that single mothers are always tired, which is a kind of tired that doesn't fully go away, but that you learn to move through. I am also happy in a way I didn't expect to be this soon, not because everything is resolved, but because I know exactly who I am and what I'm building, and who I'm building it for. The stuffed rabbit is still a little stiff in one ear from where it sat in the puddle that night. I washed it 3 times, and it came mostly clean, but the left ear has never quite recovered its original shape. Ren doesn't care. She calls him Bunny, and she insists on his company at bedtime with the same absolute certainty she brought to choosing Pip, the certainty of a small person who knows what she needs and is not shy about it. I kept the rabbit. I didn't replace it with a perfect version. I kept the one that got thrown into the rain and came back a little changed, because that felt like the right thing to do, because that felt true. Derek called me once, 4 months after everything was finalized. I